Hey guys, so I've got the camera between my legs. Ooh, yay. So, some more under the microscope. That's all blurry because it's not hitting anything. What I'm going to use today is my CKC Streamline in AEBL steel because it's what I've got here today. So let's have a look at this under the microscope. First I'm going to sort of use the microscope by hand. I'll show you how I'm using it. Basically I've got it that far away and I'm just sort of free playing it. So manually focus at a distance to try and show a picture of the blade up close. Just like under a magnifying glass really. And just give you an idea of how the convex blade looks at this sort of size and the kind of bevel. This has got a micro bevel on that was applied with sandpaper. I've just ran this over 400 grit on the face and a micro bevel. So you can see it's quite a thin blade. Try and get a bit closer to the microscope. Now the face itself, while I ran it over with 400, there'll be mixtures of 220 and other stuff in there. That's why I micro beveled it, to get a clean sort of 400 effect. So let's get a bit closer. Focus it in. But you can see how lean that grind is. Reflecting. If we look at it this way, try and wipe the gunk off. We use the microfiber cloth to try and clean it down a little bit of microparticles. And there's stuff coming off the cloth. God, it's reflecting too much. This is easier with a patina. Hopefully you can see the convex shape and bevel there. Try and adjust the focus. A little bit tricky. Okay, well let's go straight down to magnifying onto the blade and see what we can see. So this is at the roughly sort of 60 zoom, and you can see this is, as I said, I just rubbed this over 400 paper. You can see a few deeper marks from 220 grit and things, but then that shining light area is just a quick little steeper micro bevel. And to give you an idea of where the micro bevel is, it's this portion just here. Now let's take it right in to 400ish. And this is a stainless steel. Okay, so you can clearly see the micro bevel now. That was done by raising the edge just fractionally on the sandpaper because the light's reflecting differently. And you can see it's quite clean, but as I said, it looks jagged at this magnification even though it's a very clean edge. Now I have intentionally not done any stropping just to show you how it looks off the sandpaper. And we're just running up most of the blade, getting to the belly. I'm just drawing this through by hand, catching a few fibers. So you can see it's quite clean all the way through. Got a little microscopic bit of something there. Bit of paper or something. See how long it takes to draw an entire blade through at this zoom. And there's the tip. Now let's try and do a face look at the edge of the blade at this magnification. Oh, much harder to see the blade without a patina. There we go. So hopefully this is coming in nice and clear. Let me try and zoom the camera just a tad bit more. Very hard to keep it controlled by hand at this magnification. But you can see it's pretty clean. Oh, I'm going to zoom this just back out a little bit more. I'm trying to focus on two things, the camera and the film. Never a good ploy. There it is. So you can see it's nice and clean at 400. And the bevel face is pretty clean too. So that's enough of that grit. We will now go and get some more sandpaper and sharpen it up. Now, if I got a piece of paper just to test the sharpness at this level, let me find something. We'll use a bit of foam book paper. So this is unstropped straight off the sandpaper, and it's reasonably clean cutting with a pull cut. Has trouble push cutting without stropping. So I'm going to pause now and go give it some more sharpening. Okay, 800 grit's the only other paper I have at the moment. So I just quickly ran it over with some 800 grit. Now let's go down to the 60-ish. You see that's starting to look a bit cleaner. Again, I haven't done a perfect one. I'm just hand rubbing for a minute or three. And but the face I think looks a bit cleaner just off memory from 5 minutes ago. And look at the bevel. Now we'll quickly just look at the bevel this way at the 60 grit, 60 zoom, sorry. I'm going to keep getting zoom and grit mixed up. But you can see how the transition of this blade is very clean, with just the subtlest micro bevel at the very end to support the edge against failure. Now let's crank it right up. Okay, so that's the face of the steel right before the edge, and here is our micro bevel. Now I'm not going to point out too much here, I'll just let you look at it and see for yourself the differences, skip back and forward, maybe open the video in two different windows and pause at different timed intervals so you can compare the pictures. But you know, 800 grit compared to 400. Now I don't have any other higher grit sandpapers today, but I do have my strop. So the next logical thing to do would be to strop it and show you the difference. And I'll show you how much stropping I'm going to do. Now let's look at it this way, down the blade. If I can find the blade on the microscope. There it is. And adjust the focus. Okay. Can we see the micro bevel area transitioning? That would be nice. I don't think the focal depth will really give that to us though. Very hard to do that, unfortunately. So let's get back to the actual apex. you can see how clean cut that is and how thin it is. You know, and that's for a sharp edge, and these are just hand sharpened. This is not a jig or anything else, it's just me rubbing it on sandpaper. Little bits of paper there or something from the paper towel I wiped it with. Okay, let's get a piece of paper and show you how sharp that was. 800 grit. I'm holding this at a funny angle, so very little difference, to be honest, in feeling. I normally find that you really got to deburr it before you're going to notice that. So now, let's run it down a piece of plastic. Like so. There's little bits of cuts all over the paper. That's a bit cleaner. Let's just zip that under a microscope. I doubt we'll actually notice a significant difference, but what that pen running down will tend to do is just pull off all sorts of tiny little burrs and chips that might have been sitting there. Okay, so have a look at that. Now we're going to quickly strop the blade. Let me get a strop. Zip the camera around. So, got my big strop there. Camera angle's a bit funny. I'll hold it long ways like this off the table, so you're only going to see a portion of it, but we're going to go 1, 2, 4, so that's 2 each side. Now, just for good measure, I'm going to run it through the wood and feel the edge. It feels quite smooth, so that wasn't in frame. All I did was get a piece of the edge of the wood and run it through. Now I'm going to give it a couple more light passes at a slightly higher angle. Okay, we'll zip this back around here. Now, just before we look at it, let's quickly just do a cut test now and see if I actually had any improvement from that. See how much cleaner cutting that is? You should be able to see and hear it. Now, wasn't 20 minutes of stropping, wasn't 5 minutes of stropping. Stropping only needs to be done for a few seconds to have significant effect. If you're doing more than that, you're really wasting your time. You're better off just using some 2000 grit sandpaper or anything else abrasive. Now let's have a look at this, and let me line it up and have a look under the microscope. Doesn't look much difference, but if you look, there's more light reflecting off this. The scratch pattern itself pretty much looks the same, but if you look closely, I don't think my camera can focus if I zoom too much. There is simply more light reflecting on that portion there, and that portion there is microscopic, but it's reflecting the entire way. If we look on the face, let me get, sorry, just got to find it and focus it in. Yeah, and you compare it to before. What the stropping is doing to improve the effect of the cutting, it is cleaning up the apex. That apex there. That is so small that you just simply can't see it with your eye, but that is what the strop is cleaning up. Sure, it's polishing the side bevels, but not much. Not in 3 or 4 strops. You can see the scratch pattern at this angle of the bevel. All that 6 strops or so that I just did. Sorry, I've got to unzoom this again, you're missing out. All that tiny amount of stropping did was polish the very edge of the apex. Let me just strop it a little bit more and try and get some of that paper towel and things off. I'm just going to do a couple of strops on each side. 3 or 4, doesn't really matter, to get the newspaper print that. Now I'm just swiping it on the microfiber cloth to try and remove a little bit of any paper towel and compound that might be sitting there. And let's get back on the edge. There's a good picture, hopefully. Alright, there's the polishing compound sitting there. Microscopic pieces of lint and stuff. But it's incredibly fine. You know, your cutting edge that's doing that business of shaving your hair or whatever, it's that microscopic thing there. And that's where the difference really sits between the 400 and the 800 grit and the stropping, is how clean that tiny, tiny, infinitesimal piece of steel is. And as you can see here, the light reflecting off the side of that tiny, tiny portion, because it's been polished by the compound after a few hits. More and more and more polishing on the strop might polish this portion of the bevel here a bit more, and it's effectively working like a fine grade sandpaper, but the purpose of the strop is to clean up the apex of the edge and refresh it and make for some good cutting. Now, just as a final and let's just test the bevel performance on this knife like we did with the kitchen knife on this phone book. At 800 grit. It's pretty high performance, as you can see. Just want to quickly show something while we're at this that relates to the under the microscope thickness and that. This is the Spyderco I recently received as a gift, and you know, this by most people's measure is what they call a really finely ground blade with a nice thin edge angle. I'm not sure what the edge angle is, but just looking at the size of the bevel tells you that as thin as you think it is, it's not actually that thin on the edge. Now, ridiculously sharp, no question. But let's push into here with a little bit of force on a sort of a 45-degree angle in and down. 2 hands. It feels like I'm flexing the knife. Okay, now I'll just put this on autofocus for a second and move it closer. Or my mouse just ran out of batteries and I won't be doing that. So it's out of focus, I know, but that's all I could do with that grind. Even though this is what most people who buy a knife may perceive as a very thinly ground knife. Spyderco is well known for that. Very thin grind. And never tried it before with this. Let's just see how this one works. Spyderco Military. Lots of people say this has got a thin grind. very sharp. Let's same angle. That's as far as I can get into that one. Now, with the convex, which still feels like it's got a lot of meat in the blade. If you touch this and touch those, you think, oh, this feels thicker possibly. But it's got a thinner edge on it. Let's give it a whirl. Who knows where it'll go. Haven't tried this, but if we look down here, out of focus as it is, we're talking about there compared to the Spyderco Military and the Manix 2, which are both what most people think are as super fine edges. And this is how important it is, that really tiny infinitesimal difference down there, because, you know, people saying that you're going to barely be able to measure the difference between these sort of thing, well, it's really quite measurable.